I'd like to thank you for inviting me on the show. It's such an honour to be here, and I'd just like to say that when I'm not playing Xbox with my mate Thor, I really like to listen to my favourite podcast, Pop Culture Pasta. Hey Dave, I'm thinking about doing another revolution. Do you want to join up? I might need some help with organising the pamphlets though.
Pop Culture Pastor.
All right. So, Cody. Hi, this is Pop Culture Pastor podcast. My name is Dave Cody's here.
I am.
Yeah, I figured I'd just start off a little different this week.
You threw a curveball that I wasn't expecting.
He's all thrown off now. And but I have a reason because I want to do something different at the beginning of this podcast, something I want to call fast topics.
Oh, I like slow ones.
And this will be something maybe a little deeper, maybe a little off the pop culture path, the pop culture path, to just talk about real quick. And I'm just going to go with a question. Why is the commentary around what makes a man so toxic right now?
It's just because right now other groups are definitely being lifted up, and usually when there's a perceived lifting up, the group that's not being lifted assumes that there's a pushing down, whether there is or is not by the majority. And so as women and minority groups are being lifted up, as they should be, there is a perceived notion of men being put down.
Yeah. Okay. So like, it seems like this comes up over and over and over again in our culture. Now there is a reaction. Then there's a reaction to the reaction. Then there's a reaction to the reaction to the reaction. You see where I'm going with this? Like, so over the weekend, the news was about this weird church conference about, manly men, I guess. And there were like UFC fighters and monster trucks and pyro and flamethrowers. And you're saying this was a church conference, Dave? And I'm like, yeah, I don't get it either. It's weird. But it's all this like reaction, and then they get a reaction to their reaction. And then at some point I'm just kind of over here. Like I'm REM. That's me in the corner wondering when we're going to stop reacting and start thinking.
Yeah, I definitely get that there's going to be a segment of people that definitely identify with some of the imagery that that particular church conference uses, and maybe that's their attempt to broad swipe as many male groups as possible, because you got the sports guys, you got the car guys, you got the military guys, you got the hunter guys. And so if you include everything all in one umbrella, then boom, you got them all. But it's a bit way too much.
Yeah, it's wild because I think what we can say is we're trying to, what we often do in our culture when we sense something is bad, right? So in this instance, the patriarchy, right? We're saying all these things and we're trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were, and say all strong men are bad. And so they're reacting to this fallacy, right? The fallacy is no, actually you can be a strong man, but be gentle, be humble. And that's good. That's also being strong. That's also being manly. And so, but instead of keeping a level head and pointing that out, it's just this so you get the all patriarchy and therefore all strong man outlets are bad. The reaction is, well, we're going to be even stronger. It's like Michael Scott, I'm going to do even stronger, more toxic male things now.
It happens, yeah.
It's so weird. And sometimes that meme and The Office itself and Michael Scott, it was such a ahead of its time commentary on our society that sometimes it boggles my mind.
I also think that in the Midwest, we're a little far behind on the times. And so maybe Michael Scott in The Office wasn't too far ahead on the coast.
How dare you? I'm not behind the times. I'm listening to Cyndi Lauper. That's cutting edge, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Back to our regularly scheduled. That was Fast Topics.
We survived.
You're not going to clap? It's just going to be me? You're just going to let me clap?
I am surviving it, so.
All right. That was rude.
Acknowledging.
All right. This is Pop Culture Pastor. Now we get to our regularly scheduled pop cultureness. Hey, do you know who Josh Gates is?
Do I know him?
Yeah, Josh Gates.
I wish I knew him in person.
The host of Expedition Unknown on the Discovery Channel.
Or Travel or Max. Whatever.
Yeah, it's on so many things now. But Josh Gates is really, he's a great follow on TikTok, by the way.
I don't have TikTok.
What do you mean you don't have TikTok?
I don't have TikTok.
You send me TikToks all the time.
I send you reels.
Oh, same diff. Half of those are TikToks that they just repurposed.
Yeah, but you can't follow like Josh Gates reels.
Anyways, Josh Gates is an archaeologist who hosts this show, Expedition Unknown. It's a very fun show, especially if you're like a history and archaeology geek.
And he also does enjoy the pop culture.
Yeah, yes, and he's a pop culture guy. He loves making fun of like bad answers on Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. He does a lot of reels and TikToks on that. And he's just got a lot of charisma. He's just an interesting guy. And he's going on tour, which I'm immediately curious. He's coming near us. You sent me dates of when he was coming, and I'm like really curious.
We need to email his people and see if we can get a press release.
You think so? You think we
Yes.
could? I don't know.
Naming it and claiming it now.
All right, name it and claim it. Anyways, I just didn't know if anyone out there was also a fan of Josh Gates. I'm a big fan.
I watch the show quite a bit. I even like go back and watch old episodes just because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's intriguing.
I want to be best friends with Josh. I would trade Cody straight up for him right now. Oh,
If I got to shake his hand and like have dinner with him, I would allow for that trade to happen.
it's fair trade. It's fair trade. Okay, we got to talk about this because everyone's talking about it and it's bugging me. It's one of those things, again, we're talking, it's a reaction and then a reaction to the reaction and then a reaction to the reaction to the reaction. And in this one's in the arena of sports, which is pop culture.
Oh, okay. I thought we were talking about Red Lobster going bankrupt potentially.
I don't want to talk about Red Lobster and that possibility because it makes me too sad. Where am I going to get my Cheddar Bay biscuits? The ones you buy at the store aren't the same.
Well, good luck.
Man, yeah, that's too sad for me to talk about. I want to talk about Caitlin Clark, the basketball star.
My friend
Your friend. You know Caitlin Clark.
on X.
You follow Caitlin Clark on social media. Fantastic. Is she the best women's basketball player ever?
Too early to say that.
She's pretty good.
Greatest college basketball player ever, potentially.
Yeah.
For sure, the greatest ever to not win a national championship. Because UConn, like in the 90s and aughts, had tons of talent, and she'll have to prove it at the highest levels.
Yeah.
But she is looking like the Chef Curry of the ladies' game, or he's looking like the Caitlin Clark of the men's.
There you go. There you go. So she got drafted number 1 overall in the WNBA draft. Not a shock.
Number 1 in our hearts.
By the Indiana Fever. Her rookie contract is for 4 years, $338,000, which means this year she will make in this first season $76,000, and change, $76.5 thousand. And people on social media started going crazy. They were like, Victor Wembanyama makes, he was the number 1 pick in the NBA
Wimby.
and makes, 100, how many millions?
It's like 20 mil a year.
Yeah. And so they were comparing it. And I saw there was so much on social media about this is what inequality looks like. And I have thoughts on this. Because what I want to tell you is, yeah, you're right, this is inequality. But it's probably not the way you think. Are you ready for this? I'm about to make people mad.
I don't know why we would do that on this show that's about unifying people.
Well, okay, I want to unify people in common sense sometimes too.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with that the WNBA has never made money. It's completely subsidized by the NBA. They keep it afloat, basically. Now, the women's game is showing signs because of people like Caitlin Clark of maybe exciting people, and I think that's great.
Some would argue the past 3 to 5 years, the ladies' WNBA is better than the men's NBA.
Yeah. Now, I would also say I love that there is a WNBA. If my girls were into basketball and they loved watching Caitlin Clark play in the WNBA, I know there's girls out there that do, I think that's fantastic. I think it's fantastic that they have someone that they can see, that they can look up to, who can continue her career beyond college in a professional ranks. But that being said, it's not inequality that she doesn't make as much as the men's players, because the men's players generates millions of dollars and WNBA doesn't generate anything. So in actuality, in a capitalistic environment, it would have gone belly up. We let things die in capitalism. That's how it is. Your business, like if I opened a business or you opened a business, Cody, and it didn't make money, it wouldn't last long.
Unless someone wanted to keep my business afloat, and then I got ideas.
Right. If they wanted to keep it afloat, that's great, but that is a privilege. And what I want to say is the WNBA doesn't make money. So the inequality is actually that we keep it afloat because it is important to our girls who play basketball, even though there's not that, there's more, there's other pursuits out there that women are more interested in, right? But we keep this afloat because we do think it's important, and I do think it's important. But she can't make $10 million if the league's not generating any money. We're actually doing equality by saying women's basketball is important enough to our girls that we're going to keep it afloat even though it's not making money. That we wouldn't do that for a lot of men's things. We cut men's swimming in college because we try to do the equality thing to make the women's and men's sports equal, and instead of adding women's sports, we cut men's sports. And they justify it by there's not enough interest in it. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this?
I do. And
it's not a perfect analogy, I know.
I am of the mindset, and this would probably tickle last week's communist Dave's ears.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That we need to maybe cut the men's cap, but their salary.
Where does all that money go then?
Well, also cut down the cost of tickets. My goodness.
Well, I would go for that.
Billionaires are increasing their billions. Millionaires are increasing their millions. And yet, the areas that they're playing in have economic struggles. And when you hear people complain about, players leave teams because, they lowballed me with a $5 million offer. Mm-hmm. Or you hear people complain about making $76,000. There's a lot of people around the United States that would be like, you work the summer and you make that much? Yeah, sign me up. So, if anything, I'm on the mindset of let's just hack and slash everything.
Yeah. Well, I have a solution as well, because I'm not going to just complain and not have a solution like all of America, right? So here's my solution. Why don't they just do the WWE thing? Why don't they just bring the women in, call it all the NBA, and then do double headers, right? So like you do in high school. Mm-hmm. Like the girls varsity plays, then the boys varsity plays. So you bring their seasons run concurrently. You buy a ticket, you get to come into both games for your price of your ticket. Then you don't have to worry about all this. Well, what are they coming to see? Well, they're coming to see both of them. It's all part of the show, right? And then you don't have to worry about this classification. And then if you want to pay Caitlin Clark the money she's worth, which she's probably worth more than that, her skill level. Although she's not, like, it's not Caitlin Clark that's hurting.
No, because she definitely is getting sponsorships out the wazoo.
It's the other ladies that are picked after her that you're not as familiar with, who don't get all that. So I don't know. Like, I see and understand and hear that I wish they got paid more. In a capitalist environment, it doesn't make sense. But I feel like there's some solutions the NBA could affect where they could say, you know what? We're not doing this NBA, WNBA thing anymore. We're going to pull them in. It's all the NBA, and it's all part of the same show. That way, they're doing their part, and they're involved in the money making.
I also was on board of any fines that happen in the NBA season, all that money just goes to the WNBA salaries. And
Boom.
Then they disperse it evenly amongst the how many ever teams.
Book it. I'm here for it. All right, let's go into more of our normal pop culture. Hollywood beef is better than rap beef.
Oh.
Yeah. I know we make a big deal, not us personally, but our culture makes a big deal out of rap beefs all the time.
J. Cole apologizing after releasing a diss track. I was bamboozled, perplexed.
Everybody has rap beef with Eminem until he embarrasses them, and then they don't want to have beef with him anymore.
Or Kendrick. I don't know why J. Cole went after Kendrick, but then immediately was like, my bad.
Apparently, Joaquin Phoenix does not have a fan in Brian Cox.
Resident cranky guy and my hero.
We've talked about Brian Cox recently because he has been in the news as a cranky guy, quite frankly. And he had thoughts about Napoleon.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one that watched it with thoughts.
He says this about Ridley Scott's Napoleon. Quote, terrible. It's terrible. He's like Charles Barkley. Terrible. It's terrible. A truly terrible performance by Joaquin Phoenix. It really is appalling. I don't know what he was thinking. I think it's totally his fault, and I don't think Ridley Scott helps him. I would have played it a lot better than Joaquin Phoenix. I tell you that. You can say it's good drama. No, it's lies.
Ridley made some choices. Joaquin was Joaquin.
I mean, Brian Cox is just going in on people. He has reached the point in life where he has no cares to give.
I assume he knows that people are either going to cast him or they're not going to cast him, and he's just going to be his true self, for better or for worse.
Yeah. He's providing me and you with entertainment, which is nice.
Cinema.
He didn't stop. He went in on Joaquin Phoenix. He said, I think he's well named. Joaquin, wacky. It's sort of a wacky performance.
I wish more people had seen this film, so then I can talk about how wacky of a performance it was. It was weird.
Yeah. Then he went in on Braveheart. And you're like, no, not Braveheart. Yeah. So he was on some show on the BBC, and they were talking about the loss of historical accuracy for the sake of good drama. And Brian Cox said, Braveheart is a load of nonsense.
Okay, so I had a religion professor in college that, like every religion class, he would have a couple of assignments that where you watch a movie and you compare it to the subject matter that we talked about in class. And he would do it with philosophy stuff. But he's like, any Mel Gibson directed thing is just Mel Gibson putting himself into a historical context.
Yes. And I love it.
And it is all violence. Like the Passion of Christ was Mel Gibson saying, here's me as Jesus, even though he wasn't in it, and all the violence.
It's Jim Caviezel.
Yes.
Jim Caviezel plays Jesus And Jim Caviezel,
Jim Caviezel is the stand-in for Mel Gibson.
like, look, I love Jim Caviezel, but let's face it, he's gotten weirder since that came out.
Well, he got struck by lightning.
I mean, are we going to talk about that? Like, that seems like a sign.
Could be. I'm not naming and claiming it, but
No, I mean, you know, obviously I'm joking a little bit because we don't want anyone to get struck by lightning, and that's scary. But yeah, Brian Cox said Braveheart is a load of nonsense. He does say Mel Gibson was wonderful, but it's a load of lies.
yep.
He says it's bollocks, that film, which is a British thing to say, I guess. And he would know, I guess. He lives in that area. That's where he's from. So I guess he would know if we were making up the whole Scottish Braveheart storyline there.
I like to think it was 100% accurate.
Let's talk about a guy who's a little bit more even-tempered, who we actually dearly like.
Martin Scorsese.
No, but Marty did tell me to tell you that this podcast is cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're cutting it up, boys. It's over. We're all done. Let's pack it in. We'll see you never because it's over. We're going out on top. We're retiring. No, I'm just kidding. Keanu Reeves
Keanu.
made some news yesterday. He has just been cast in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. He will be voicing Cody's favorite character, Shadow.
Literally, I now have to watch the first two because
You haven't watched the first two?
No, I'm okay with Sonic. The rest of his friends can kick rocks most of the time. Shadow is the most interesting of the non-Sonic characters, and I think he's actually more interesting than Sonic. And
So tell me, why is Shadow different? Why are there multiple hedgehogs in this video game? Tell me about, what is Sonic? He's a hedgehog.
he's a hedgehog with shoes that can run fast.
Okay, so they have powers.
They do. And coins.
Knuckles has gloves. Is that why he punches things?
He's not a hedgehog.
Sonic's not, or Knuckles isn't a hedgehog. What is he?
Is Knuckles a fox?
Is that what he is? What's Shadow? Shadow's a hedgehog.
Shadow's a hedgehog, but he's like the Wario to.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So is he a bad guy?
For bits and pieces.
All right. Okay. This is all confusing. I am not going to watch any of the Sonic movies.
How dare you?
I don't even care that they cast Keanu Reeves. I'm like, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for my friend Cody that his favorite hedgehog character in the Sonic series of games is going to be in this movie, but I'm not interested. I'm currently watching Fallout. I have once again violated my rule about not watching things based on video games. And I'm about 3 episodes. I'm 3 episodes into Fallout. And it's interesting, but I feel like it's what I'm afraid of with all video game stuff is that you have to be a fan of the video game to kind of understand what's going on sometimes. Because Fallout is wacky, man. It's wild and weird. And I'm interested, but I can't fully engage with it because I just don't know what's going on. And I don't feel like the show's doing a good enough job of telling me.
Well, it's building.
What's building?
The show.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that they're going to spell some things out for me.
So, Knuckles is an Echidna.
You can't even say it.
I can't. It's an anteater, essentially. It's a spiky anteater.
He looks just like the other ones. I can't tell a difference. And that Knuckles show looks terrible.
And I was thinking of Tails before.
No, who's Tails?
Sonic has a bunch of friends.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. See, this is my problem. Is there's all this mythology building in these video games, then they turn it into shows and they don't explain it well enough. You're just supposed to know because they expect everyone. Like, look, if you're gonna be a crossover hit, you got to do a good job. The Mario movie did a great job of. Like, they introduced tons of characters right off the bat, but you get the sense of what's going on if you're not a Mario guy.
Well, if you watch the movies, you might get a sense. But with me explaining to you...
Which movies? Like
the Sonic movies.
The old TV show with Captain Lou Albano? No, not... You're talking about Sonic.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
Sonic.
Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
What about the one with Ed Asner? What if we did live action Sonic, not the CGI guy, and it was Ed Asner playing Sonic. Do we think that could work?
His Spectre.
Jack Black as Knuckles.
No, thank you.
All right. Last thing, because I just love to talk about Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner was being interviewed recently, and he cast himself in front and behind the camera for Horizon American Saga, which actually kind of looks interesting. The trailer was great. It's like looks like a classic Western. So Kevin Costner in the Western type genre again. I will be looking forward to the best mouth actor in the game doing his thing with his tongue inside his mouth, whatever it is he's doing. I don't know.
I think that he doesn't drink enough water, and so he has dry mouth.
He has cotton mouth all the time.
Yes.
Apparently, Chris Hemsworth, in a recent interview with Entertainment Tonight, talked about losing out on a role to Kevin Costner. And Chris Hemsworth said this in the interview. He said, there was a movie, a script that I'd read and loved and was like, I want to get that. And it was a romance movie. I think it was romantic. And then someone said, Kevin Costner has that role. And basically, Costner, when he heard about this, explained why he opted to make himself the star of his own movie because he was directing it. And he said, quote, it's a love story, but as long as I'm still young enough to play it, I'll play it. Chris will have to wait his turn. What thoughts? I mean, is he young enough?
I was going to say, is this Cocoon?
Costner's great, man. Costner's like, I'm going to play the love interest in this movie, Chris. Just move aside, Thor. I got this mouth noises.
I like to think that because he was a part of the DCEU, that he has Marvel beef. And that's why he didn't cast Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, I always forget about that.
He was Paul Kent.
I forget that he's Paul Kent because I blocked it out.
He's up on a mountain for no apparent reason as a ghost,
Actually,
just moving stones.
As I've said before, I'm actually okay with Kevin Costner's performance in Man of Steel. I am not okay with some of the storytelling choices with Paul Kent.
I'm still confused why he, in the afterlife, is moving rocks on like the top of a mountain.
Well, why not? All right. It's time for us to go into our main subject. We'll be right back. Here we go. We got a new show style here. This is a new, what am I looking for? A new template? Maybe that's the right word. A new style of show? I don't know how to describe
archetype.
It. A new archetype. That's good. Man, we should just start this over and go with that.
Can't do it.
We don't do it. Let's just keep rolling. A new archetype of a show here. And I think it'll work well after we do pop culture drafts. Because let me tell you what happens. Every time we do a pop culture draft, like for instance, last week was disaster movies, we start pouring through these, like our research basically. And it starts off with lists. Like list to me, I Google the best disaster movies according to the internet. And inevitably, there's always one movie on a lot of these lists that neither of us have seen.
Word.
And so I thought, just like a Be Kind Rewind, except for this one we haven't experienced yet. And so we'll call it This Missed Us.
Or Have You Seen This?
Have you seen this? That one is fun. Well, that's the full name of the archetype. It'll be This Missed Us, semicolon, Have You Seen This?
Question mark?
Yeah. A long title, but it works. The movie that kept popping up on a lot of people's lists was a 2007 movie called Sunshine.
This movie was not like all rainbows and stuff.
No, it's listed as a sci-fi thriller, hour and 47 minutes long. So it's compact, which was nice. 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. Let me just read you the synopsis here. Let me get my in a world voice going. All right, you ready?
Don LaFontaine.
In a world. No, that's not how it starts off. In the not too distant future, Earth's dying sun spells the end for humanity. In a last-ditch effort to save the planet, a crew of 8 men and women venture into space with a device that could revive the star. However, an accident and a grave mistake and a distress beacon from a long-lost spaceship throw the crew and its desperate mission into a tailspin. Directed by Danny Boyle, Cody.
That's a name.
Screenplay by Danny Boyle and Alex Garland. Put out by Searchlight Pictures. Made, it cost $40 million to make. Made $36 million. Eek.
It wasn't going to make my capital list of you have to make money.
Yeah. I had a lot of people in this movie, which we'll get to, that maybe weren't as, a lot of up and coming people. And the first thing I want to start off with here is I'm really curious to hear the feedback from this episode, because I want to know if other people have seen this movie and we just somehow it missed us. Like, that's the name of the show. This missed us. I want to know if we were just weirdly out of the loop on this and lots of people saw this, or if a lot of people, this missed a lot of people. So it being on all these lists makes me think that a lot of you out there listening to this may have seen it. But Cody, what I want to ask you is, why do you think this missed you?
I mean, I'm graduating at this time.
High school?
Yes.
Oh, you're so young.
I feel like we're in the Nolan trilogy for The Dark Knight around this time.
Yeah, do you want me to read you the top 10 in box office from 2007?
Please do.
Spider-Man 3 was number 1.
I definitely watched it against my will.
Shrek the Third. Transformers, the first live-action Transformers.
That one was enjoyable.
Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is surprising to me that was only number 5. The Bourne Ultimatum. 300 by our friend Zach.
Loved that one.
Ratatouille at number 8.
Didn't watch it.
I Am Legend. You've never seen Ratatouille?
Not all the way through.
Oh, wow. Number 9, I Am Legend, which was one of my picks last week of my disaster movies. And number 10, The Simpsons movie. And I'm going to throw 11 in here just because I want to. Wild Hogs!
Yeah!
Yeah! Face it, that was the classic that year. When I think 2007, I think Wild Hogs. But yeah, so yeah, why do you think this missed you? You were graduating, just wasn't in your wheelhouse?
And I'm living in Southeast Kansas in a town with 4 screens, and I don't think this one was taking up one of those 4.
Yeah, but you regularly will go to bigger cities to go see movies.
That is a thing that I
Not at that time.
started doing with my wife.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So we've talked to this is nice, because usually it's me where I haven't seen something because it hits me in a weird time. For you, this hits you in a weird time where maybe you're not as tuned into the pop culture as you normally would be.
A little bit.
Yeah. So I think when I think of this, so by this time, I've got a kid, I'm married. We clearly went and saw movies, though, because I've seen plenty of these. I know I saw Spider-Man 3. I saw Transformers.
Saw Wild Hogs.
Pirates of the Caribbean. Saw Wild Hogs 4 times. I mean, that was a return trip for sure. 300. There was a lot of, this is the time of the comedy still. So lots of comedies on this list as you go down. Knocked Up, Rush Hour 3, Night at the Museum, Superbad came out this year. Blades of Glory's even in the top 25. Ocean's 13. So like this was at a time when the comedies were still out there making money. And I'll tell you what's not. You don't see a lot on this list. Sci-fi. There's no sci-fi. There's like a weird sci-fi drought after, I think maybe the Star Wars prequels had like kind of just sucked the sci-fi fandom out of the culture for a little bit. Not that they were, I'm not saying they were, not because they were bad, just because the Star Wars prequels dominated consciousness for a while. And like people, like there were lines for them, people would camp out for them. And then maybe we just got sci-fi'd out for a little bit.
I was going to say, I know around 2010, Predator with Adrian Brody came out.
Yeah, I'm looking at this list.
And so I do think there's a weird drought.
Yeah, I'm looking at this list, and I'm through the top 50, and I see no sci-fi, just nothing, which is weird because we live in a time where Dune has brought sci-fi back a little bit, as we are sitting right now. What was the other one? There seems like there's another one.
Sharknado.
No. Look, the computer didn't like you saying Sharknado is a sci-fi. It's like, no, Cody, don't bring that nonsense in here.
Prey was really good. But it didn't get released to box office because of weird streaming agreements and being bought out. But the sequel or sequel is going to be released in theaters.
Yeah. So I think like sci-fi is just not in my consciousness at this point, because I can remember hearing about this movie and I honestly just wasn't interested in it when it came out. So I just think I just passed on it. So I guess we should just start talking about the movie. Like we said, there is this mission. You kind of join this mission in progress, and what you're told is what you're left to ascertain is that the Earth is in trouble because the sun is dying. You're in some kind of future. Alternate reality, whatever future, and the sun is dying, and these are like Earth's brilliant minds.
Technically, it's like 30 years from now.
Is that when it is?
I think it's like 2057 or something.
And they're on a mission to the sun to launch a bomb into it. Apparently, it's not. They don't get real specific. You just know that that's what they're there to do. And then things happen. It's one of those movies where it's very simple, but very affecting, very effective. I was super engaged through this whole movie, Cody. It was, in fact, as I was sitting there watching it, about halfway through, I'm like, oh, this is great. Why didn't I watch this? I'm loving this.
As I'm watching it, I'm more intrigued by the amount of people that are now big or recognizable. Yeah. And then I had to go back and be like, had Chris Evans done a Fantastic Four at this point? And yes.
The second one comes out the same year.
So you don't get Chris Evans doing this too much with the exception of Knives Out. But for a while, he played the jerk a lot. And I kind of so I hate him so much as the jerk, but that's why I like it, because if we go with wrestling terms, he's a heel that gets heat. Like anytime the WWE brings out Jake or Logan Paul, whichever Paul brother wrestles, I'm like, I despise you. But it then gets me to root against him and gets me more invested in the story. And him as a jerk face gets me more intrigued and more invested in the story and rooting against him most of the time.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about his character is I don't even know that calling him a heel is fair, because he's not a heel per se as much as he is like a blunt object, right?
He is.
That's I think one of the things this movie did real good, and I'll just start off the what's good segment, is this movie does a great job with the ensemble and the characters. Whoever's writing this, right, writes this story that's very plausible. It's very human, and it's this kind of exploration of the different ways and contexts and perspectives of thinking about and looking at life, and in this case, a job to do. And that, like, what I love about this is it invites all these questions in this story where no one's really right and no one's really wrong. You know what I'm saying?
There were definitely times that I feel my friend Chris was wrong.
Really?
Yes. And there's one key thing that happens that I'm like, okay. And then I store it back, and then like another event happens and he almost contradicts it. And I'm like, why would you have him do this?
Well, yeah. So, but he's clearly like, they don't flesh out the backstories enough. You get the sense that he's a military guy, maybe, because he's all about the mission.
He's all about the mission, and that's great. There's a logical issue between him and Cillian Murphy that doesn't get resolved well for me.
Okay.
So save that for what doesn't work.
Yeah. What's good? Tell me something good that you liked about the movie.
The whole stinking cast.
Oh, the cast is amazing. Run through some names.
My friend Cillian Murphy.
Oscar winner, Cillian Murphy.
Michelle Yeoh.
Oscar winner, Michelle Yeoh.
Rose Byrne.
Oscar nominated? No, I don't know.
Christopher Evans.
Captain America, Chris Evans.
Cliff Curtis is in this.
Dude, as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, that guy. He's an amazing character actor. When he's in a movie, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah. The Wongers.
Benedict Wong, same thing. If he's in it, it's good.
Hiroki Sanada.
He's amazing, too.
Evidently, I need to watch Shogun.
Yeah, that's probably the next thing on my binge watch list.
And then Mark Strong is the other person I recognize by face, not by name.
Yeah, Mark Strong is kind of your legendary British. You can tell it's when you hear he's got a distinctive voice.
He does,
And
very much so.
You know it's him. So yeah, just tons of recognizable people in a movie that just didn't make very much noise when it came out. So yeah, I had the same thing. Number one, the cast.
Wongers.
And the Wongers. Always a treat for the Wongers to be present. What's good is it's immersive, right? Like, the story pulls you in. It's interesting. I like these kind of stories. It's not, the Earth's in danger, so we got to send a mission out. It's a trope. Like, it's not a super original sci-fi tale. But there's something about it that does pull you in. And if it's told well, it can still be a really good, really intriguing story because there's something about humanity fighting to live that's really, in a sci-fi setting especially, that's just really engaging with our minds, I think.
For me, I think that they did a good job of getting you to experience, as the viewer, some of the cabin fever that would have been setting in for being several months / years out at space, traveling towards the sun, and also some of the doom and gloom that happens as the crew continues through their voyage. And so, you definitely got the roller coaster of emotions and experiencing what the characters are experiencing.
Yeah, another super intriguing theme for me. What happens to humans in isolation? That's always interesting me. Castaway with Tom Hanks is just one of my favorite movies. And it's just because I'm fascinated with this idea of what happens to humans when they're isolated.
Terminal. He was sort of isolated, but not really. He was just trapped in an airport.
Stuck in an airport. I've seen it 1,000 times. He does not talk to a volleyball.
Nope.
Like he does in Castaway.
But completely renovates the tile work.
Yeah.
Like a bathroom or something. I don't remember.
So, yeah, like I said, the story for this is these collection of scientists who have been put together on this mission that you get the idea is probably a suicide mission, but there is a chance that they do this all safely, but there doesn't seem to be, it doesn't seem to be a high percentage. You get the feeling that there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Fear, I guess.
Existential dread.
Existential dread. That's what I'm looking for. That all these smart, brilliant people on this ship, there's a plan for them to do this and get away and do it safely and win the day. But they all just don't kind of maybe fully believe that that's a high probability.
Everything has to work out right. I do like when they are presented with the distress beacon. Like, well, we have to decide whether we go try to rescue Icarus 1 or if we just keep with the mission. And the mission affects like everyone else on Earth.
One of the most interesting scenes in the movie, actually.
Yes. I'm of the mindset you just keep heading towards the sun because I feel like everyone on Icarus 1 should have been dead because it was 7 years. And... like, I know you got the chance of getting a second projectile.
Yeah, that was the much bigger thing, though. It wasn't the people. They weren't nearly as concerned about the people as they were the second bomb.
Yes, but even with 2, you still aren't guaranteed anything.
Yeah. So that to me was one of the more interesting scenes in the movie. And it's you're because as a viewer, you're like, well, you should just stay on the mission like Captain America says. You got to stay on the mission. The mission's what's most important.
I agreed with him.
We're talking about the survival of the Earth, and you're like, yeah, he's right. But then someone else is like, then Cillian Murphy's character is like, yeah, but the probability, this is where I kind of get some of the idea that the probability is pretty low. A lot of things can go wrong. And if we have 2 bombs, that increases our odds. And then I'm like, he's right too.
It was a win-win or lose-lose.
Yeah. Anyways, I love things like that. We'll talk a little bit about that in deeper themes as well. The stakes are high. I like movies where the stakes are high, and this movie does a great job of exploring exceptional humans under exceptional pressure. Dig it.
Word.
It's always good. The technical aspects of this movie, though, I was very surprised by how good the visual effects were. The cinematography and the audio. Cody, the audio. What happened to movies? So back then in the mid-aughts, from the mid-90s to the mid-aughts, we had like this sound revolution where everything was about Dolby and surround sound. We did the cool little intros in the movie theaters, and the sound was amazing. And this movie's like sound editing and the cinematography and the technical aspects, the special effects. Oh, it's a beautiful movie, technically.
Okay, so I can actually give you a good theory.
All right, hit me.
It's because of our friend JC, James Cameron.
Oh, our other friend.
Yes.
I was like, I'm really wondering how Jesus did this.
No, Jimmy Cameron.
Jimmy Cameron. Yes, our other friends with those initials.
So his Avatar movie shifted from having quality everywhere to having super quality in the visuals. Because, I mean, watching this, there were things that the director chose to do, like graphics-wise, that I'm like, well, this kind of looks like the Star Wars graph thing that they use for the tracking missiles that looks kind of clunky and old school.
I mean, it's almost 20 years old, this movie.
Yes, but I'm like, literally, we're just a couple years from Avatar.
Yeah.
And so, like, there are some stylistic choices that, like, it's not perfect, but it's great. Like, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
And the sound is really good. And so, like, the sound was probably the one thing you could control the best. But then when everyone, their mom's like, well, we got to catch up graphics-wise, and we got to catch up with, like, creating stories that are kind of like this, then it shifts the focus. And so, like the Book of Eli, terrific sound. Like
I love the Book of Eli. Underrated movie.
When he's spinning his machete and like stopping the bullets.
I don't like
stuff,
that kind of language, but yeah.
like it's pretty epic, especially if you have the surround sound on. But like Avatar, I don't need the surround sound on. I just need my 3D glasses.
Yeah. I don't think comic book movies helped either, especially in the last few years when they just started rushing them.
And also, and it might be my friend Zack Snyder's fault as well, that, like, as far as the sound quality of the set itself isn't as important as the music that you're going to use. And so, like him, James Gunn, several others are like, well, we got to insert these bombastic songs or bombastic scores. And that's really what's more important than, like, being able to have good sound quality and be, like, shocked when you hear a noise just out of the blue. And
yeah. Well, okay. So, but in this, I thought it was really good. It just brought me back to the time when the sound was important. And I wish it would be. Oppenheimer is a good example of, I don't think we've totally lost that. The sound in Oppenheimer is great.
well, that's because my friend Chris of the Nolan variety might be the best of the Chris's.
Yeah, he might be. Yeah.
And he is all about fine cinema.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that you want to point out as good?
Nah.
Okay. Well, let's move to the what's not so good. What doesn't work in this movie?
Okay, I got like a handful of things.
Oh, wow. All right.
But I'm going to start with what I had teased earlier. So, Chris Pratt, but Chris Evans and Cillian Murphy's characters, they fight after, like, Cillian Murphy takes too long recording a message for his family. After that, Chris Evans, who is portrayed as, like, it's all about the mission, all about the mission. There's a scene where Wongers adjusts the trajectory manually, but forgets to adjust, like, how the sun's going to hit the space shuttle and or the space station.
Let me fill in the context.
Burns up stuff.
They venture off their planned path to answer this distress call and go find another bomb on the first mission that they lost contact with.
7 years ago.
And because of a mistake by our guy, Benedict Wong, who goes by a completely different name in the movie, of course, just a technical error, bad things happen.
Bad things do happen.
And go on.
Okay. So they have to go outside to try to fix it. And
another sci-fi trope.
It is. And Hiroki, who... phenomenal in Mortal Kombat, by the way. He's like, as the ship's captain, I'm going out there, but I need someone else. And Chris Evans is like, I volunteer. Kappa, which is Cillian Murphy. And Kappa is like, sure, why not? Whatever. Well, if you flash forward like 30, 45 minutes later into the movie, they dock with Icarus 1. And then an explosion happens and they get separated from Icarus 2, which is the vessel that they were originally on. And Chris Evans is like, Kappa has to be the one that survives. He's the only one that knows how to do this.
Yeah, that was weird, huh?
We put Kappa at risk earlier where Hiroki dies and Kappa barely survives. You would have been without someone able to launch this nuclear device into the sun. But, it's all about the mission. I'm not celebrating you, Mr. Evans.
That is a plot hole.
It was.
That is a plot hole because that doesn't make any sense. Do you want to run through all of yours? Because I got one, but it's a big one.
Okay, so, like, I don't want to, like, dwell on this too much, but the science doesn't science.
Okay.
I did read an article.
Wait. Are you saying that blowing up the sun, launching a huge nuclear weapon into the sun would not reignite it?
Not the way they were trying to do it. According to the article I did read. And also,
go ahead, Cody deGrasse Tyson. Tell me.
If they got that close to the sun, that like, they're burning up.
They had a shield. It's a force field.
Slash.
It's just like when we were kids.
I question, like, if you're that close and it burns everything up, won't that ignite or cause a reaction with the nuclear device?
Well, they somehow circumnavigated that. Not important information.
But this was a movie that I'm like, Neil deGrasse Tyson should talk about this one. Like, it's weird when he talks about like superhero movies and random movies. Like, could this actually happen or not?
Yeah.
Where with like the science movies, yeah, I appreciate your comments, astrophysicist Neil.
Yeah, because this one, they lean into the realness of it, right?
And there were a plethora of articles online that I will not bore you with that said, the science doesn't quite science here. It's not fully accurate. It's not Chris Nolan level.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. What's next?
That was the big gripes.
That's it. Okay.
2 big gripes.
All right. So I've got for me, it's a storytelling choice.
Okay.
So we spend the first 2/3 of the movie on this mission. We divert from the mission. Things go awry. They eventually end up docking with the Icarus 1. More things go awry. People are dying. We somehow get back with half the crew aboard the Icarus 2. And then it becomes a slasher movie.
Yeah.
The captain of the old vessel has somehow managed to survive. He's highly insane. His name is Pinbacker. And his skin, he looks like Freddy Krueger, I think, because we never get a clear look at him. The directorial is a weird directorial choice here, where every time he's in the frame, the camera's like kind of wildly moving. And I understand that as I'm watching it, I'm supposed to understand that it's chaotic, and he's trying to get you in on the chaotic nature of this.
He's a wild card.
But this Pinbacker, it's almost cartoonish how evil he is. He's like evil incarnate. We aren't really privy to why. He's kind of a force of nature, like Freddy or Jason. And it just becomes a slasher flick at this point. And all of that was super weird. Was it not weird? I thought it was super weird. I'm just like, what happened here? Why is he so strong? He's like supernatural.
And I mean, again, there's some logical leaps you're having to make in this movie.
Yes.
So if he was able to survive the 7 years on the space station Icarus 1, and it showed they were able to grow all the plants. Mm-hmm. Something happened that they were compromised. It sounds like he sabotaged the Icarus 1.
He definitely sabotaged it. Then he sabotages the Icarus 2.
But that goes back to the mental health cabin fever. Like, you get locked in and you get isolated with your thoughts, and you're with the same people for extended amounts of time in a small place.
Yeah.
The human element, that is, yes, it's a stylistic choice, but it, like, again, if he could survive the 7 years, it's a believable one that, oh, this dude is not wired for this.
Yeah. So it's clear that Mark Strong's Pinbacker character, like, starts to go crazy, lose his mind. He sabotages the first mission. That's the dots we're connecting. He's got this weird connection with the sun that is sort of paralleled in the character of Searle, played by Cliff Curtis.
I was going to say the ship's psychologist.
We think he's going to, like, he's the choice early on where you're like, oh, this guy's going to go crazy because he's super fascinated with the sun. In fact, we see his skin like he's peeling in places by the time he ends up sacrificing himself. There's a lot of sacrifice in this movie, but he actually goes out heroic, even though he's gotten kind of weird as far as his like love of the majesty of the sun, right? Whereas Pinbacker has done the same thing, but in a much crazier way. And so we get that, and that's interesting. But yeah, it's odd.
It's really interesting because the ship's original captain, Kaneda, played by Hiroki, tells Cyril that, or Cyril asks him, like, what do you see, as he's about to get burnt to a crisp? And so he's really obsessed with it. I think it's a good analogy because I'm going to use the language of Pinbacker for people that have supernatural experiences with a heavenly being. That it seems like people that get to that level go one of two ways. And that is, you're obsessing with it, but you see the greater good and you know that, like, you got to do whatever's right because you don't want to disappoint. Or you go, like, extremist cult-like, everyone has to die.
Yeah.
And that's what Pinbacker does. And Pinbacker says, God told me that he wants all of us to join him.
Yeah. So he says lots of weird things. This is a good place to move into our deeper themes category. So I feel like there's lots of deep themes. I just mentioned sacrifice. That's an ongoing theme in this movie. Often the heroic part of movies like this, there's lots of heroic sacrifice going on.
Tons of it.
In this movie. What else? What other deeper themes did you notice?
So there is, like, a lot of religious imagery and talk specifically about God. From stardust we came, to stardust will return.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of what's the best thing for humanity. That they realize the sun is the source of life for the planet, and the sun kind of sits in for God, if you want to make it a religious movie.
Well, the weird thing is I read a commentary from a pretty an outlet you would have heard of. And it was written, like, I think 2019, so some years after the movie came out.
Close to 15.
And they said a lot of the characters represent, like, he was trying to tie it to other sci-fi, this science versus faith discussion.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know that that's a real perfect analogy for what happens in this movie, because, again, we see this, like, usually when it's the science versus faith thing, it's not done real well in the fact that, like, they're biased. They want to prove that one is better than the other. Whereas this movie, I feel like the conflict is more human driven.
It is. Also in this movie, we get the initial start or theme of Cillian Murphy and his love of bombs.
Let me ask you a question while we're talking about deeper themes and possibly religion themes. Pinbacker is, like, very much a slasher in the end of this movie.
Yep.
He appears to be super powered. Like, he's holding up Cillian Murphy by the throat in a very gross scene, actually, the way that ends. But he's got, like, this weird power, and he says weird things. He says, I talked, past tense, I talked with God for 7 years. Is Pinbacker supposed to be Satan? Is he supposed to be, like, quote unquote a fallen angel?
Well, I mean, you look at the name of the mission to begin with, Icarus, who
flew too close to the sun,
and didn't think there would be consequences. There was, and if you go with Satan, Satan's someone, angel that thinks, I am on par with or just above God. And you know what? Whenever you get into that mindset, you elevate yourself to a higher standard, and then boom,
Yeah.
the fall happens. So I would be intrigued to watch this maybe more through a religious lens, but since our podcast isn't a religious podcast, I didn't dive too deep into it, just because I do think that there are some characters that might stand in better with either some religious characters within the Bible or some like the 7 deadly sins, because there are 7 crew members.
Here's the problem with trying to go too deep in any of these themes is I don't think the movie's worth it. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to swing this back from deeper themes to what's not so good. I feel like this is one of those movies, and this happens occasionally, where, okay, so I'm a big fan of telling a story where you have the story happening, people, their lives, whatever the problem is, whatever they're trying to overcome, and underneath it is this one deep theme, like an allegory, that by the end of the movie you're like, oh, or the end of the story you're like, oh, okay, it was really telling this story about this. So for instance, Oppenheimer is a story about like, well, are humans who end up in these situations, are they good or bad? Like the Columbus problem, right? Christopher Columbus, is he good or bad? Well, he's neither, because anybody else in his situation in his time would have done the same thing. Oppenheimer's the same way, right? Is he good or bad? Well, he's neither. If he wouldn't have done it, some other scientist would have stepped in.
Yeah.
Bomb was getting created. It was inevitable. So there's that. Christopher Nolan, who's like kind of the master of these stories. Interstellar is about love.
Yeah.
And the power of that, the power of the connection of that. So, and he does it wonderfully, Chris Nolan. That's why he's one of the best. So a lot of his movies have this underlying allegory of stuff going on. I think one of the things that I have a problem with in this movie is they had like 5 ideas for a deeper theme, a deeper thing to say with this movie, and they couldn't decide which one they wanted to go with. So they just make this weird amalgam of a movie where they're trying to say all these things, and I don't know that it quite works, because what I'm left with is a movie I watch, I'm into, I'm engaged, I'm into it, I'm curious, and then by the end of it, I'm like kind of unsatisfied because I don't know that it really says anything.
I think maybe the most important scene in the whole movie is the last scene of Cillian Murphy's sister and presumably nieces and nephews in Sydney, Australia, that's completely frozen over, and the sun brightens, and that the theme of sacrifice ends up being maybe the biggest theme. And that there is hope for tomorrow, that there is people that will sacrifice for the greater good, and that will keep going on.
And we love that.
We do.
Human beings love that story. But this is my point. The last third of the movie was a slasher film.
It was. And whenever Pinbacker was on, it was so shaky. Yeah. I felt like I was reliving the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah. And so that's my point, is like make it about the sacrifice. There was enough conflict already between the characters, between the scientists, to make it interesting. It's high stakes. It's already high stakes. Why even? You didn't even need the Pinbacker character. It's just a weird addition at that point. So yeah,
but
I'm
then
confused.
You would not have Mark Strong.
Right. Well, right. Cody, who's your winner of the movie?
It is Cillian Murphy.
Okay, why? Because this does not launch him into superstardom.
No, but so I do know several people, and if you believe what you read, that this is a movie that some people went back and watched and was like, oh, this guy's good. We're going to keep casting him in at least these smaller roles. in bigger franchises, and he eventually gets a break. But it's shown that, yeah, he can do a great job as the lead guy in this movie. He can probably do a great job in other things. And so I think that this movie, although it doesn't launch him, it's definitely a stepping stone.
Yeah. My winner of the movie is Chris Evans. I was impressed with Chris Evans in this movie. When I saw that he was in this movie, I was like, oh, hey, he's much younger here. I wonder how good this is going to be, because I don't remember him super fondly from Fantastic Four movies.
I despise each iteration of the Fantastic Four until Pedro comes onto the scene. And
for goodness sake, why do you even throw that in there? You just want to upset me.
Yes. But this reminded me of his character in Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
See, I don't get that. I didn't think he was such a bad dude in this movie. He's no nonsense.
He's no nonsense.
He's by the book. Like, my thought was like, is this the role that gets him Captain America? He reminds me a lot of Captain America. He's by the book. He's no nonsense. But he is very human.
So I think there is more humility and grace with him as Captain America.
Yeah, definitely.
Where this one, it's like, I don't care. We're doing this.
Yeah, he's super flawed, to be sure, in this movie. I didn't mean to imply that he wasn't. Who's your loser of the movie?
It was a toss-up, really.
Oh, it wasn't for me. I know exactly who I'm picking.
And I have to go with Wongers.
Oh, Wong? I thought he was great in this.
I mean, he was, but he didn't get that much screen time. And also his character was the one that caused all the chaos. And then he ends up unaliving himself, potentially with the help of Pinbacker, but probably just himself.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he does make the mistake, but Chris Evans' Mace character is right. It is Cillian Murphy's character's fault. He's the one who directs them towards that course of action.
Well,
where there's no opportunity for Wong to make a mistake.
I could also say it's the captain's fault. Like,
Yeah,
why
'cause
would
he
you
allowed
even
it.
put that up for a vote?
Yeah.
And Cillian Murphy waited till the last moment, and he's like, it's a coin flip.
Yeah.
And so I guess heads.
For me, the loser of the movie is poor Mark Strong. Who is a wonderful character actor, especially for a bad guy. We hear his voice, which, is, like we said, is distinctive. We know it's him, but we never get to connect his performance to him due to the very weird directorial choice to really shake the camera anytime he's on screen. I don't understand the choices. Like, to me, it would have been much more frightening I get why it's shaky at first, but at some point, give us a clear picture of the monstrosity that this guy has become.
You do get a good image of the skin coming off his arm and his teeth as that's happening.
Yeah, we get like, I don't know. I feel like inside this was a chance for. So Mark Strong usually plays like this really calculating, cold bad guy. Where in this, he gets to play a movie monster.
He was a loose cannon.
He's a slasher flick monster. And I feel like I wonder what he thinks of this role. Like, if he thinks, man, this would have been a nice role for me to really show just get outside of myself type thing. And he's kind of denied it. And so he's my pick for loser of the movie.
He was my backup loser of the movie.
Yeah.
Primarily because of the shaky camera angle stuff.
I feel like you can't say he got fully wasted because his voice is so amazing and distinctive. And just the sound of his voice is enough to be like, oh, this is menacing. Even if it doesn't make sense to the story I thought they were telling.
It made me want to drive a British sports car.
Okay, so this movie missed us originally.
It did.
Here's the big question. In lieu of a rating, does this movie now join your rotation of a movie you will now watch? Or are you never going to probably watch this again?
I mean, I probably will if it is on like a streaming that doesn't cost.
Okay.
With it costing right now, and me just renting it, I was like,
You're not going out of your way to watch it.
yeah. So, like, there was a movie it reminded me of, especially once we got to Pinbacker being there. I think it's called The Core.
Yeah. Well, all these movies have this now. Interstellar has these vibes. When they go Matt Damon's character, who's gone a little insane.
Oh, no, it's not The Core. What is that Sam Neill movie?
Oh, yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Event Horizon.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Because that one got dark in a hurry. And it became like a slasher movie towards the end. But Sam Neill, like, goes full Sam Neill.
Yeah. That's a trope. That's definitely a trope where, we're on this last desperate mission, but we get an emergency beacon from the mission that went out 20 years before us, blah, blah, blah. And now we go and we find a guy alive and he's nuts.
Yep.
I've seen it a million times.
Don't-
Still interesting. It was telegraphed here. You see it coming. Although, to be fair, this came out before Interstellar.
It definitely came out for Interstellar, not before Event Horizon.
No. For me, I don't know that.
It's not one I'll go out my way.
Yeah, to me, it's going to be like usually if a movie is for repeat watching, it's like, I want to watch this with my older kids, my wife, because I like it so much. I want to hey, I watched this good movie. You should watch it. And I just don't know. I was into it and then just like kind of dissatisfied with it at the end. And so I'm left with this weird feeling of like, man, I really think there was a good story inside this somewhere and they just didn't quite nail it.
Remake, reboot, something.
Yeah, I don't even know if you could do it now, though, because now it's kind of troped out. We've done it. We've seen it now.
You would have to make some stylistic choices that are different.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree. All right. Tell us what you think. If you've seen Sunshine, let us know. It was definitely interesting. But yeah, if you agree with us, disagree with us, whatever, make sure and subscribe to the pod. If you're watching or listening to this on YouTube, make sure and like the post. That helps us with the algorithm. Subscribe to us there as well. Review us when possible, when able. That also helps. Thank you so much. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, join the community Facebook group, all of that. We love community. We love hanging out with you because the world is trying to divide us by the things we don't have in common, but we believe we actually have lots more in common than what we do not. And we say, hey, let's come together over the things we like. And on this podcast, we like pop culture. We enjoy talking about movies and TV and video games and all the other stuff. If you do too, welcome. But now we're leaving, so goodbye.
Toodles.
That was weird. That was kind of a weird segue, but we're leaving. We'll see you next week.